In December 1944, Germany made one final desperate gamble to win the war. They surrounded an entire American division in a frozen town called Bastogne. No supplies, no reinforcements, no way out. German generals were certain the Americans would surrender within days, but they made one fatal miscalculation. They forgot about George Patton. What happened over the next 48 hours would shatter German confidence and seal the fate of the Third Reich. This is the story of the men who watched it happen. December 22nd, 1944. The Ardennes forest. Field Marshal George von Rundstedt stood over a map table in a freezing German headquarters. At 70 years old, he was the most senior commander in the West. He had conquered France in 6 weeks. He had seen the Reich at its height. Now he was watching its last chance unfold. The plan was audacious. A massive armoured thrust through the Ardennes, splitting the Allied armies, capturing the vital port of Antwerp. Hitler called it Operation Watch on the Rhine. For a few breathtaking days, it worked. German tanks punched through American lines. Entire units were overrun. Panic spread through Allied command. But there was a problem. One small town refused to fall. Bastogne sat at the crossroads of 7 major roads. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement through the entire region. German commanders knew this. They had to take it. So they surrounded it completely. Inside were 10,000 American soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division. They were low on ammunition. They had almost no winter clothing. Temperatures dropped to 15 below zero. Medical supplies ran out. Men were dying of frostbite. On December 22nd, German commanders sent a formal surrender demand. The American general's response became legend. One word: nuts. Von Rundstedt permitted himself a grim smile when he heard this. American bravado, he thought. It would fade soon enough. The encirclement was complete. No force on earth could reach Bastogne in time. He was wrong. 300 kilometres to the south, George Patton was already moving. While other Allied commanders debated and planned, Patton had seen the opportunity the moment the German offensive began. Not a crisis, an opportunity. On December 19th, he made a promise that stunned the Allied High Command. He would turn his entire Third Army, over 100,000 men, 90 degrees north. He would smash through German lines. He would relieve Bastogne, and he would do it in 48 hours. The other generals thought he was insane. Armies don't pivot like that. Not in winter. Not across icy roads. Not while already engaged in combat. The logistics alone would take weeks to reorganize. Patton didn't have weeks. He didn't even wait for permission. His staff had already prepared 3 contingency plans. While Eisenhower was still asking questions, Patton's divisions were already on the move. Truck convoys rolled through the night. Tank columns ground north through snow and ice. Military police stood at every crossroads, directing traffic with flashlights. It was the largest, fastest military pivot in modern history. And the Germans had no idea it was coming. December 26th, early morning. Von Rundstedt was reviewing supply reports when his aide entered with a message. The field marshal read it twice. Then he set it down carefully, as if it might explode. American armoured columns had reached Bastogne. The encirclement was broken. For a long moment, von Rundstedt said nothing. Behind him, officers waited in silence. Someone coughed. A radiator clicked and hissed. Patton, he finally said. Not a question, a verdict. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. If the Americans could redeploy an entire army in 48 hours, in winter, across impossible terrain, then every assumption about this offensive was wrong. Every timeline, every calculation, every hope. Von Rundstedt turned to his chief of staff. His voice was steady, but something had broken behind his eyes. This changes everything. 200 kilometres east, Field Marshal Walter Model received the same news. Model was different from von Rundstedt. Younger, more aggressive. Hitler called him "my fireman," the man sent to rescue collapsing fronts. He had pulled miracles on the Eastern Front. He believed in fighting to the last. But even Model understood what this meant. He read the report, folded it precisely, and placed it in his pocket. "We underestimated them," he said quietly. "Not their soldiers, their decisions." His staff waited for orders. Model stared at the map for a long time. The offensive had depended on German speed, on catching the Allies off guard, on forcing decisions before they could react. Patton had just proven that the Americans could move faster than Germany. The war in the West was over. Model knew it. He just couldn't say it. The news from Bastogne spread through German headquarters like poison. Officers who had celebrated a week ago now spoke in whispers. The offensive wasn't just stalling, it was collapsing. And everyone knew why. Fuel reserves were measured in days. Many tanks sat frozen and useless, their crews burning anything they could find for warmth. Artillery shells were rationed. The Luftwaffe was grounded. Against this, the Americans seemed to have unlimited everything: fuel, ammunition, aircraft, and now, apparently, generals who could bend time itself. Von Rundstedt convened a meeting on December 27th. The atmosphere was funeral. "The Americans have regained the initiative," he said. "Once lost, it is rarely recovered." No one argued. Some officers in that room remembered France, 1940. They remembered being the ones who moved faster than thought. They remembered watching enemy generals scramble to react, always one step behind. Now they were the ones scrambling. Hitler predictably refused to accept reality. From his bunker in Berlin, he issued furious orders. Counterattack, retake Bastogne, restore the encirclement. He blamed his generals, he blamed the weather, he blamed everyone except the plan itself. The generals listened to these orders. Then they returned to their maps and did what they could to save what remained of their men. The dream of Antwerp was dead. The dream of splitting the Allies was dead. The dream of negotiating from strength was dead. All that remained was survival. Years later, those who survived would remember Bastogne as the moment hope died. Not dramatically, not in a single explosion or defeat, but quietly, under layers of snow, in freezing headquarters, in the faces of men who finally understood. Von Rundstedt would be relieved of command 3 months later. He would spend the rest of the war watching Germany collapse, powerless to stop it. Model would fight on, retreating across Germany, until April 1945. Surrounded in the Ruhr pocket, facing capture, he walked into a forest alone. They found his body later, a single gunshot. Patton would keep moving. After Bastogne, nothing could stop him. He crossed the Rhine, drove into the heart of Germany, and ended the war as the most feared Allied commander. But in that frozen December, none of them knew how the story would end. They only knew that something had shifted, something fundamental, something irreversible. Speed had been Germany's weapon. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, the doctrine that conquered Europe. At Bastogne in 48 brutal hours, George Patton had taken that weapon and turned it against them. The German generals understood this better than anyone. They had lost more than a battle. They had lost the war.